Greetings, I'm Reverend Dewey McCormick, Head Minister of Induzan, Perfect Dragon Mountain, Shinganji, True Vow Temple, of the Nichiren Shu Sangha of the San Francisco Bay Area. In this presentation in 3 parts, it is my goal to cover those things about the life of Nichiren Shonin that Nichiren Shu expects its clergy to know. I feel that this might also be of interest to dedicated lay practitioners, as well as those who are curious about Nichiren Buddhism and would like to know more about its founder. In addition to the history and teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, I have also drawn upon material from my narrative biography of Nichiren Shonin called Lotus in a Sea of Flames, and passages in the 7-volume series Writings of Nichiren Shonin, published by the Nichiren Shu Overseas Propagation and Promotion Association. As much as possible, I will allow Nichiren Shonin to tell his own story by reading passages from writings as found in the Writings of Nichiren Shonin. On the slides, I will cite these volumes with the initials W and S, the volume number, and the page number of that volume. I also provide citations from corresponding passages, when there are any, in the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, which is in 2 volumes. I will cite these volumes with the initials W and D, and then the volume and page number. I cite these for the purpose of comparison with the Nichiren Shu translations, and on those occasions when they provide the only English translation widely available. Now let's begin the third of the 3 parts. Furthermore, in Reminiscences from Tatsunokuchi to Minobu, Nichiren Shonin goes on to describe the Sado exile. After a considerable time, I was told to go to a place called Echi in Sagami Province. I said that I did not know how to get there. Someone had to guide me, but nobody was willing to lead me. After a short rest, a soldier pointed to a road saying, "This is the way to Echi." So we went along the road, arriving at Echi around noon of the 13th, where we entered the residence of Honma Rokudo-zaemon, the vice-governor of Sado Province. We had to stay in Echi for some 20 days. Meanwhile, arsons took place 7 or 8 times, and murders occurred nearly every night in Kamakura. Some made false charges to the shogunate, blaming disciples of Nichiren for those recurring arsons. Believing that might be the case, the commissioner made a list of some 260 disciples and devotees of Nichiren to be banished from Kamakura. It was rumored that the Council of State deliberated a proposal to banish all of them to distant places or to execute imprisoned disciples of Nichiren. However, it was later found that the arsons were the work of precept holders and Nembutsu believers. It was a trap to discredit Nichiren's disciples and followers. These and other events are too complex to describe here. We left Echi on the 10th of the 10th month and arrived at the province of Sado on the 28th of the same month. On the 1st of the 11th month, I entered the Samaido Hall in the wilderness called Sukuhara, located behind the residence of Honma Rokudo-zaemon. This place was a rundown hut about 6 foot square in size and without a statue of the Buddha, built in a place where dead bodies were abandoned, like the Rendaino in Kyoto. Nichiren Shonin's enemies hoped that Nichiren Shonin would die in the harsh winter of Sado Island without any adequate shelter or provisions. However, Nichiren Shonin's strong determination and faith allowed him to endure these extreme conditions and to befriend the local peasants and samurai, who then provided for his needs. This exile is commemorated on October 10th as the Sado exile. Back in Kamakura, Nichiren Shonin's followers were also being persecuted, and many turned against Nichiren Shonin and the Lotus Sutra out of fear. In a reply to Lord Ueno, the Ueno Dono Gohenji, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "My former disciples such as Shobo, Notobo, and the nun of Nagoe were greedy, cowardly, and even ignorant. They claimed to be intelligent, and when they were persecuted, they persuaded many people through their connections to give up the Lotus Sutra." In a response to my lady, the young nun, Niyama Gozen Gohenji, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "In Kamakura, 999 of my followers out of 1,000 lost their faith when I was exiled to Sado." Nichiren Shonin, however, wrote to his followers to tell them that these persecutions were only to be expected. In fact, he was glad to have a chance to be martyred for the sake of the Lotus Sutra, as it gave him a chance to expiate past misdeeds and to attain Buddhahood. For example, in a reply to Lord Toki, the Toki Dono Gohenji, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "I understand that you lament for me, but since I expected this to happen from the beginning, I do not lament for myself. In fact, I regret that I have not yet been beheaded. If I had not been beheaded for the sake of the Lotus Sutra in the past, I would not have been born such a lowly man." As stated in the encouragement for upholding the sutra, chapter of the Lotus Sutra, practitioners of the Lotus Sutra will often be driven out of monasteries. I've received punishment from time to time for the sake of the Lotus Sutra, eliminating serious transgressions committed in my previous lives. As this is the only way to attain Buddhahood, I am willing to undergo ascetic practices. In the letter from Sado, attributed to Nichiren Shonin, the author writes, "On the 16th and 17th days of the first month of this year, hundreds of priests and lay believers from the Nembutsu and other schools here in the province of Sado came to debate with me." Further, in reminiscences from Tatsunokuchi to Minobu, Nichiren Shonin goes on to describe this debate at Tsukahara. While I spent my time in this manner, the snow-covered yard became impassable. Nothing except the strong wind visited me in the hall. During the day, I continued reading the Great Concentration and Insight and the Lotus Sutra, and chanting the Daimoku all the while. Whereas at night, the moon and stars in the sky were my audience as I preached the differences in doctrine among the various schools, as well as the profound teaching of the Lotus Sutra. In this way, time flew, and soon it was the beginning of the 9th year of the Bunei era, 1272. Stupidity of people is the same regardless of where they are. Here in the province of Sado, I heard that a few hundred people, including precept holders and Nembutsu devotees, such as Uemita Butsu, Shoyubo, Inshobo, and Jidobo, gathered together to discuss matters concerning me. Some proposed, Priest Nichiren is none other than the infamous archenemy of the Buddha of infinite life and an evil priest who leads many people into the evil realms. He is a wicked priest exiled to this island, and no one banished to this island has ever been able to survive. No one has ever been able to return to the mainland alive, even if one were able to survive the prison term. Therefore, even if we should murder him, we would not be punished by the shogunate. He is isolated at a place called Tsukahara. No matter how courageous or strong he may be, since he is alone there, let us go there as a group and shoot him to death. Others suggested Nichiren was to be beheaded, but due to the pregnancy of the wife of Lord Hojo Tokimune, the execution was postponed. However, before too long he will surely be beheaded. Still others insisted, let's ask Lord Homa Rokuro Zaemon to behead Nichiren. If he doesn't do it, let's do it ourselves. Enticed by this last suggestion, several hundreds of people gathered at the constabulary office to see Homa Rokuro Zaemon, a deputy constable, Shugodai, in Sado province. Rokuro Zaemon told them, I have received a covering letter from the shogunate directing me not to kill Nichiren, but he is an important prisoner. If something happens to him, it will be my responsibility. Therefore, you should slay him solely in debate. Accordingly, the Nembutsu devotees and others, accompanied by young priests carrying the triple Pure Land Sutras, the Great Concentration and Insight, Shingon Sutras, and so on around their necks or under their arms, gathered at Tsukahara on the 16th of the first month. Several hundreds of priests from not only Sado, but also other provinces such as Echigo, Etchu, Dewa, Mutsu, and Shinano, crowded in the large yard, fields, and mountains of the hall. The whole family of Rokuro Zaemon and his brothers, as well as numerous lay priest farmers, joined the crowd. Nembutsu devotees each cursed and swore. Shingon priests turned crimson with anger, and Tendai priests predicted their victory at the opening of the debate. Laymen derided me in a loud voice. This is the infamous enemy of the Buddha of infinite life. The jeers and shouting resounded like thunder. After allowing them to make noises for a while, I called out to them, You have all come here to take part in this debate. It is thus useless for you to utter such abuses, is it not? Rokuro Zaemon and other attendants agreed with me, and they evicted those Nembutsu followers who abused me by seizing them by their necks. The debate started. I first listened to their explanations about the teaching of the Great Concentration and Insight, their beliefs about the Shingon and Nembutsu teachings, and asked questions on each to make sure of their claims. Then I closely questioned them, silencing them in a few words. They were more hopeless than Shingon priests or the followers of Zen, Pure Land, and Tendai schools in Kamakura, so you can only imagine how dull it was for me to engage in a debate with them. It was like cutting a cucumber with a sharp sword or a strong wind blowing down grasses. They were not only far less knowledgeable in Buddhist doctrine, but also often made contradictory statements and mistakes, calling a sutra a commentary, and a commentary an interpretive work. I discredited them, pointing out that Shandao, a patriarch in the tradition of Pure Land Buddhism in China, committed suicide by jumping from a willow tree, and that stories claiming Grandmaster Kobo threw a three-pronged vajra from Tang China to Japan, or that he appeared as the great Sun Buddha in a debate held in the imperial court, were false, and to believe them was an act of sheer madness. Unable to reply, they hurled abusive words, became dumb, or turned pale. Some regretted having chanted the Nembutsu. Others threw away their kasaya robes and beads of rosaries for power, swearing never to chant the Nembutsu again. Before long, those who gathered at Tsukahara all left, and Homa Rokudo Zaimon also returned home together with members of his family. When Homa Rokudo Zaimon stood up to leave, I called him back from the big yard to tell him an unbelievable but important matter. I asked him when he was planning to go up to Kamakura. He replied, "It may be in the 7th month, when my retainers will finish working on their farms." I said to him, "The duty of a warrior is nothing but to serve his master with distinction at times of great importance to the masters, so as to be rewarded with a fief. You say that you are busy working on your farm right now, but a battle is about to occur. Why do you not hurry to Kamakura to distinguish yourself in war and gain additional fiefs? You have been a brave and honored warrior in the province of Sagami. It will be a shame for you, an honorable warrior, to keep yourself busy working on your farm and lose your chance of participating in an important battle." Rokudo Zaimon left for home suddenly without saying a word. Those who stood by, Nembutsu followers, precept keepers, and other laymen, only wondered what Nichiren was trying to say. Not even 30 days later, the February disturbance or incident occurred, wherein Hojo Tokusuke, the shogunal deputy in Rokuhara and Kyoto, was discovered to have been plotting to take over the shogunate. He was the older half-brother of the regent and head of the Hojo clan, Tokamune, and was believed to have long been jealous of his younger brother. His co-conspirators in Kamakura, Hojo Tokiakira and Hojo Noritoki, were found out and killed on the 11th, and on the 15th Tokusuke was himself killed in the fighting in Kyoto. Furthermore, in the reminiscences, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "Meanwhile, on the 18th day of the 2nd month, a boat arrived bringing news that battles had occurred in Kyoto as well as Kamakura with chaos defying expression. Upon hearing the news, Homa Rokudo Zaimon readied speedy boats and hurriedly left Sado on the same night, rushing to Kamakura accompanied by his retainers and family. Before his departure, he came to me, Nichiren, with his palms pressed together, saying, 'Save me with your mercy. I have been doubtful about what you told me on the 16th of the 1st month, but it was within 30 days that a war occurred, just as you told me. I am sure that Mongol forces will attack Japan as you foretold. Your statement that Nembutsu devotees are sure to fall into the hell of incessant suffering is also true. I will never again chant the Nembutsu any more.' Thus swore Homa Rokudo Zaimon. I said to him, 'No matter what you swear, unless Lord Governor of Sagami Province, the shogunal region, accepts what I say, people in Japan will not. If people do not trust me, Japan is sure to be destroyed. Although I have little power, I am a messenger of Shakyamuni Buddha. If the shogunate refuses to accept my words again, the Buddha and gods in heaven will make the great Mongol Empire send their forces to destroy Japan.'" Nichiren Shonin also wrote 2 of his major works during the Sado exile. The first was the Kaimokusho, Open Your Eyes to the Lotus Sutra, completed in February 1272, just after the Sukahara debate and before news of the February incident. In it, he addressed the doubts about why, if he and his followers were upholding the Lotus Sutra, did they have to face persecution and even death, and why did they not receive divine protection. He wrote, "A man called Nichiren was beheaded at the time of the rat and ox during the night of the 12th day in the 9th month last year. His spirit has come to Sado province and is writing this amid the snow in the 2nd month of the following year to be sent to his closely related disciples. As such, this writing of mine may sound frightening to you, but it should not. How fearful others will be when they read this writing. This is the bright mirror in which Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions reflect the future state of Japan, namely the conditions of Japan today. Consider this as my memento in case I die." As H.E. Tero writes, this passage clearly demonstrates that the Lotus Sutra is the correct Dharma for the latter age of degeneration, and that Nichiren Shonin is the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, the guiding master of the latter age. It is here that he indicates that the Lotus Sutra is a writing which opens and reveals Buddhahood within all humanity. First of all, it clearly indicates the 3,000 existences in a single thought, Ichinen Sanzen, the heart of the original gate of the Lotus Sutra, into which all living beings of the latter age should place their faith. The Lotus Sutra is the Dharma which is hard to believe and difficult to understand. It also explains that the persecution which befalls the person who propagates the Lotus Sutra becomes proof that the words of the Buddha are true and that he is a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin also declared that he is the leader of the Dharma during the latter age when he stated, "I will become the pillar of Japan, I will become the eyes of Japan, and I will become a great vessel for Japan," and expressed his 3 great vows. In 1272, Nichiren Shonin was moved into a more comfortable residence on Sado at Ichinosawa. Safe from the elements and from starvation, Nichiren Shonin wrote his most important treatise, the Kanjin Hanzon Sho, Spiritual Contemplation and the Object of Worship, which he completed on April 25, 1273. Eiichi Tero points out three important themes in this most important of Nichiren Shonin's writings. 1. It first lays out the Odaimoku of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo as possessing the two laws of the cause of practice and the effect of virtue of Shakyamuni Buddha, making it the correct Dharma to practice in the latter age of the Dharma. 2. It illustrates that this Saha world is the Pure Land of the original Shakyamuni Buddha, and shows the subject and features of the focus of devotion, the Honzon. 3. It indicates clearly the correct teacher who propagates the Lotus Sutra during the latter age of the Dharma, as one of the bodhisattvas of the original teaching who appeared from underground in chapter 15 of the Lotus Sutra. On July 8, 1273, Nichiren Shonin inscribed the O Mandala, or Great Mandala, in order to calligraphically depict the Gohanzon he described in Kanjin Hanzon Sho, using Chinese and Sanskrit characters. In the Reminiscences, Nichiren Shonin also wrote that his pardon from Sado and returned to Kamakura. Contrary to the expectations of the Nembutsu followers and others in Sado, who made such an appeal to the Kamakura Kamakura shogunate, however, the letter releasing Nichiren Shonin was issued on the 14th of the second month in the 11th year of the Bunei era, 1274, and it reached Sado Island on the 8th of the third month in the same year. Learning of the arrival of this letter, Nembutsu followers and others gathered again to talk about Nichiren, claiming Nichiren, sworn enemy of the Buddha of infinite life and abuser of the venerable Shandao and priest Honin, has been exiled to this island. Although he is now pardoned, it would be deplorable for us to permit him to return alive. I do not know what happened to the various plans they seem to have made. Unexpectedly, very favorable winds began blowing, and I left the island quickly. It would normally take 50 days, or sometimes even 100 days, to cross the sea, but only 3 days with good winds. I was able to cross it very quickly. However, the Nembutsu followers, precept keepers, and Shingon priests in Kokufu of Echigo Province, Niigata Prefecture, and the Zenkoji Temple of Shinano Province, Nagano Prefecture, gathered together and declared how cowardly for priests on Sado Island to have kept Nichiren alive till today, allowing him to return to Kamakura. Shame on them! They must have forgotten their debt to the Buddha of infinite life. We will not let him pass in front of the living Buddha of infinite life in the Zenkoji temple. However, as Nichiren was escorted by many soldiers from Kokufu and Echigo province to the pass before the Zenkoji temple, those Nembutsu followers and others could not do anything. Thus, Nichiren, who left Sado Island on the 13th of the third month, arrived at Kamakura on the 26th day of the same month. Back in Kamakura, Nichiren Shonin gave his third warning to the shogunate. In selecting the right time, he wrote, "In the third place, last year, on the 8th of the fourth month, in the 11th year of Bunei, I declared to Heino Zaimon Nojo, Yoritsuna, since I was born in the land under the Hojo's control, my body appears to follow your order. However, I cannot obey you in my heart. There is no doubt that Pure Land Buddhism leads to falling into hell, and Zen is the work of a heavenly devil. Especially the Shingon school of Buddhism is the cause of calamities in Japan. Therefore, Shingon priests should not be entrusted to perform prayers for the expulsion of the Mongols. If they are entrusted with this great task, they will only speed up the destruction of Japan." Then Heino Zaimon Nojo Yoritsuna asked me when, in my opinion, would the Mongols attack Japan. I told him, "No sutras specifically state when, but as the heavens seem quite angry, it will not be long before they do. Most likely it will be before the year ends." The shogunate did not heed his warnings. In fact, on April 10th, they requested a Shingon priest named Kaga Hoin of the Amida-do Hall to perform a prayer service for rain. On the 11th, it rained quietly without wind all day and night. The people of Kamakura ridiculed Nichiren Shonin, and even his disciples had doubts, and even scoffed at him according to his reminiscences. Nichiren Shonin told them to wait and see what would happen. He writes, "Before I finished speaking, a gale of wind began to blow everything up in the sky or down on the ground, large or small, including houses, halls, and towers, aged trees and palaces. Up in the sky something huge and glaring flew. On the earth, ridges and beams scattered. Lots of people were killed, and many horses and cows were found dead. It was quite unusual that such a storm blew in the 4th month in the early summer, though it was not strange to have such gale winds in autumn. No one thought this was an ordinary storm. Everyone thought that this terrible storm was brought about by the prayer said by Kaga Hoin of the Amida-Do Hall. Those who had ridiculed Nichiren were dumbfounded at the turn of events, while my disciples were astonished. In his essay on gratitude, Hoanjo, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "I left Kamakura on the 12th day of the 5th month in the same year and entered Mount Minobu. I sacrificed my life solely for the purpose of repaying the favors I received from my parents, masters, and 3 treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and my country, but I am still alive. It has been customary for wise men to live in retreat in the woods after remonstrating their countries 3 times in vain." It seems that Nichiren Shonin had accepted an invitation from Lord Haki Sanenaga, the steward of Haki village, to stay with him for a while and live on Mount Minobu. In a letter to Lord Toki Dono Gosho, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "I left Kamakura on the 12th day of the 5th month and arrived at Sakawa on the same day, Take no Shita on the 13th, Kurumagaeshi on the 14th, Omiya on the 15th, Nambu on the 16th, and arrived at Minobu on the 17th today. I have not yet decided whether or not to live in Minobu, but the atmosphere of the mountain is on the whole comforting to me, so I intend to stay here for a while." In repairing the hermitage at Minobu, the Ajichi Shufuku Sho, Nichiren Shonin wrote, "On the 17th day of the 6th month of the 11th year of the Bunei, 1274, we built a makeshift hermitage by cutting down several trees in this mountain." Nichiren Shonin would end up living on Mount Minobu until his mortal illness in September of 1282. There he concentrated on training his disciples and sending letters of encouragement to his other followers around the country. From there, Nichiren Shonin heard about the 2 failed attempts of the Mongols to invade Japan in October 1274 and later in June 1281. Though Japan was saved by fierce storms which destroyed the Mongol fleets on both occasions, Nichiren Shonin warned that a clear victory had not been won. Moreover, the spiritual conditions which made Japan vulnerable were still present and would inevitably lead to suffering for the Japanese people. His predictions finally came true in 1333 when the Kamakura shogunate fell and Japan was plunged into centuries of warfare and strife. Ironically, the shogunate fell in part because it had bankrupted itself by subsidizing expensive, esoteric or Shingon Buddhist rituals for the security of the country, and was therefore unable to pay the samurai forces which had actually fought against the Mongols. Nichiren Shonin also had to endure the persecution of his followers, for whom he cared deeply. Many of his followers had come into conflict with family members or their clan lords, such as the Ikegami brothers and Shijo Kingo. The worst persecution was the Atsuhara persecution of 1279, when 20 farmers were arrested by Heino Zaimon Nojo Yoritsuna, and 3 were beheaded because they refused to give up their faith in the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin constantly prayed for the welfare of his followers and sent many letters of encouragement during this time. In addition to his many letters, Nichiren Shonin also wrote the last 2 of his 5 major writings while at Mount Minobu. In June 1275, he wrote the Senji Sho, Selecting the Right Time. In the Senji Sho, he reiterated the 5 standards of propagation, or methods of preaching: the sutra to be preached, the capacity of the people to understand the sutra, the time of preaching, the place of preaching, and the person who preaches. In particular, this writing emphasized that the time had arrived for abolishing the provisional teachings and upholding the Lotus Sutra above all others, and propagating the practice of the heart of the Lotus Sutra, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Nichiren wrote the Hoanjo, Essay on Gratitude, in July 1276, after the death of Dozenbo, the teacher who had ordained and tutored him as a boy. In that writing, Nichiren Shonin emphasized that Buddhist practice should be motivated by the aspiration to liberate all those to whom one has a debt of gratitude, and that the best way to do this is to spread Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. He also dedicated the merit he had accumulated by spreading the Lotus Sutra to his late master. In the Hoanjo, he also first described the 3 great secret dharmas: the Gohonzon, or focus of devotion, of the original gate of the Lotus Sutra, the Odaimoku, or sacred title of the original gate, and the Kaidan, or precept platform of the original gate. Eiichi Taroho states, the Rishon Kokuran, Kaimoku Sho, and Kanjin Hanzan Sho represent Nichiren Shonin's 3 major works. These, together with the Senji Sho and the Hoanjo, are known as his 5 major writings. In the Leveling Ground Letter, Jibiki Gosho, Nichiren Shonin wrote about the completion and dedication of a temple on Mount Minobu. The newly built temple is 18 meters square. It was completed with additional eaves and was dedicated on the 24th day of the 11th month. This was the only temple that Nichiren Shonin established himself, and today it is known as Koanji Temple, the head temple of Nichiren Shu. The many persecutions and hardships that Nichiren Shonin had endured over the years had taken their toll. On September 8, 1282, he was forced to leave Mount Minobu for the sake of his failing health. His disciples hoped to take him to the hot springs in Hitachi, but he was forced to stop at the home of his devoted follower Ikegami Muninaka on September 18. In the letter to Lord Haki, or the Haki Dono Gosho, Nichiren Shonin wrote to his benefactor on September 19th. It was the last authenticated letter of Nichiren Shonin. He wrote, "I hope to return to Minobu by the same road that I passed through, but I am not sure whether or not I shall be able to return due to my sickness. Regardless, I am deeply grateful to you for embracing me for as long as 9 years while everyone else in Japan did not know what to do with me, Nichiren. That being said, I would like to have my tomb erected in Minobu Valley no matter where I die." On October 8th, Nichiren Shonin assigned 6 senior disciples, Nisho, Nichiro, Nicho, Nicho, and Nichiji, and commissioned them to carry on his teachings after his death. These 6 would later be called the 6 major disciples, or the Rokuroso. Eiichi Taro writes, "Then at 8 a.m. on October 13th, 1282, he passed away. His tumultuous life had come to a close after a total of 61 years. It was recorded that at the time of his death, the ground shook. At 8 p.m. on the 14th, he was placed into a coffin. At midnight on the 15th, the funeral was held and his body was cremated. On the 16th, Nikko recorded his will. His ashes departed Ikegami on October 21st for Minobu. A grave was erected there for Nichiren Shonin in accordance with his will, becoming the place where his spirit remains and a center for all his disciples in the later generations. After his passing, Nichiren Buddhism continued to grow. Over time, it has become one of the largest schools of Buddhism in Japan. Today, his dedicated followers can be found all over the world chanting Namu-myoho Renge Kyo. With that, I bring the third part of this 3-part presentation of the life and teachings of Nichiren Shonin to a close. I hope that this presentation was helpful and informative and will help to enrich your faith in and practice of Nichiren Buddhism.